First we'll paint the paper abstractly, and then we will cut it and prepare it for the weaving portion of the project. You can decide if you would like kind of linear strokes on your paper, since it will be a weaving that has vertical and horizontal lines, or you can just kind of go about it like I am, which is just starting off with blobs of color, letting colors run together, and see what happens. These fluid acrylics do run freely with the water and blend quite nicely. I'm now adding some acrylic ink. I might do a little bit more. I was kind of feeling like some white splatters on top of this. Then it's going to be about time to let it dry because it's really wet, and decide if I want to go further after it dries some more. Yes, this is a good point to take a break and let it dry. You can use a heat gun or let it air dry, if you have as much water as I do. My first page has dried. You could paint the second page while the first page is drying or afterwards. I had thought that I was going to paint more on top of this, but I'm not. I think it's done. This is the paper that will have the strips of the other paper going across it. For this project, I'm choosing not to have another paper that has as much energy as this one does. I'm going to paint some calmer, more muted colors. I'm choosing to have the same size paper to weave across this, but it can also look nice if you have a longer paper, and when you're weaving you could have some strips sticking out of the top or the bottom or the sides. You could vary the size of it, but I'm choosing the exact same size paper. So same process as with the first one. Paint it abstractly as you choose with whatever colors and mood suits you. I will be starting with the white gesso. And the first one I did a lot of blob, circular, organic shapes. Starting off with this one, I'm going to try some stripes to have a variety. But again, this will be cut up, so we'll see where it leads. So I'm feeling like more muted colors, more neutrals to start with. But I don't know how much I will be staying there. Here's a place where I will stop to let it dry, and this one I will do some more layering on top of it after it's dry. I let this dry overnight, and now here we go for another layer. I'm suddenly feeling like doing some patterns, so that's where we're going. Then before long, I find myself at another point where it's time to dry. So it has dried again, and I'm continuing with another layer. How to know when you're done with something? I tend to go with the mindset that if you don't like it or aren't satisfied with it, it just means you're not done yet, and keep going. At this point, I will, however, bring the first paper into view so I can kind of compare them together, seeing how they would fit together. They could be woven in this direction or in this direction, just kind of looking at how they complement or play off from each other and starting to keep that in mind a little bit more as I'm continuing with the next step. I think now I'll go in with some finer detailed patterns. A sheer translucent layer so I can still see what's underneath. I've gotten myself into a really wet painty page situation again, so here we go with drawing and revisiting. I'm getting anxious to move on after all these layers of drawing, but I'm just not feeling its content yet, so here we go with gold. You might have finished yours a long time ago, and that is completely up to what you're feeling for your project. Yes, you have guessed it. Time to dry. I feel like we're getting close on this one. After a quick break, on to some yellow, back and forth we go. All right, let's give it a try. Yay, it's ready. This paper is dried and it's ready for the next step. This is one of those papers where just looking at it at first glance, someone who's not been through it with us might think it just took a couple of swishes of paint and it was done, but there's quite a few layers underneath there. Sometimes the ending result can look quite different than what's underneath it. And that's not to say that, well, it is to say that each touch of the paintbrush on your paper is important. There's many layers, every brush stroke matters, whether you see it on the top layer of paint or it's tucked away underneath. Your painting might come together quickly, and it might have many different looks before arriving at its final destination, which is where this one is. Now it's time to cut it up. Ha! If you really love your painting and don't want to cut it up, keep it and paint a second one that you can cut up. But this one is ready to go on to the weaving portion of this project. Let's move onward. You do have a few considerations to think about. Decide if you want this cut in strips vertically or horizontally, which direction you want to weave them through onto your other paper. Decide if you want all the strips that you cut exactly uniform in width, or if you want to vary them, some skinnier, some wider. Decide if there's a pattern to the variations that you're doing, or if it's random. You could tear the strips instead of cutting them. You could decide not to cut them in straight lines, or you could use pattern scissors. The other thing is you don't have to weave the whole paper. Maybe you want to see part of your first paper left untouched, and you just want to do a section of weaving across the middle, or a couple stripes of weaving here, and a couple in the middle, and a couple down at the bottom. You could even get really wild and do some diagonal weaving. On top of all those choices, you could do more than one option in the same weaving, or you could also cut both of the papers in the different ways described. So lots of choices when you're at this stage. Weaving just doesn't have to be the same traditional even-spaced entire page weaving that you might be thinking about. My papers are pretty busy, so I am going to cut in straight lines. I am going to flip this paper over, get out my ruler, and I am going to cut it in horizontal strips. Should I do half or a quarter? I'm going to start with a 1/2 inch markings on my paper here. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the left-hand side of the paper. So I've got a 1/2 inch line, a 1/2 inch down there, and a 1/2 inch down over there. So I am going to start drawing my horizontal lines with the pencil, straight and across. I am going to keep them in order. You do not have to keep these in order. You can mix them up randomly. What I mean is you don't have to organize the strips once you cut them apart. You can just put them in a big pile. And I'm not going to peek yet. I'm going to see what happened on the other side of the paper. Whoops, as I said, I'm not going to peek. There it goes. I'm going to keep them upside down for now and be surprised. So there we have it, our second paper cut in strips. The first paper that we painted is called the Warp. This one is going to be stationary. Even though there'll be strips cut into it, the paper will remain intact. We're not going to completely cut them off like we did with the other paper. It will have vertical strips that are cut and attached to the paper as a whole. The individual strips that we already cut, those are called the weft because they are woven in and out of the other paper. They'll be woven horizontally, left and right, over and under the warp. I am folding the warp, the first paper. All right, so this is the edge, the open edge of the paper where I would like the little marks every 1/2 inch. Now the red pencil. The reason why it's red or a different color than the other one is to remind you to stop cutting when you get to it. Time to cut the warp. I am double checking that I'm starting from the fold end of the paper and the open paper edge is up there. Cutting on my pencil line from the fold through 2 layers of paper and stopping at the red. Again, if you want to be sure that you are doing this, you can do it on a sample paper. And hey, if you happen to cut your paper apart into strips, you can still weave it. So once all of these have been cut on the fold, let's open it up and see what we've got. Nice. You have some other choices here. You can draw patterns, write on them, paint more. You can also collage little strips of papers on top of these. I like the look of that a lot, but I'm not sure if I'm going to be doing that or not. Maybe I'll do it on a couple of them just to get a feel of it. I am either going over under or under over. Threading this through in a pattern. If you happen to not leave these attached and both your warp and your weft are loose strips of paper, just carefully hold on to it. It does make it easier for it to slip apart. Also, I had mentioned before that you could have some papers stick out the side if you had a longer paper going across it, and that's a pretty look, like fringe on a rug. But mine should fit about exactly. Pushing it down, and then the second one is going opposite. So this first one is under, second one is starting over, and we'll end up with that classic checkerboard pattern to it. If you happen to have two the same like this, they slide and crisscross and you'll feel like something's wrong, just take it out and put it in the opposite direction of the one under it, the opposite pattern. Once that one is done, I'm again sliding them close together and taking a look. So we have the first two. Here comes the third one. This will be in the same pattern as the first one, which is under first. So at the beginning of this lesson, we were reflecting a bit on life. I like to think of art as a visual representation of parts of ourselves or things that are hanging out in our mind or our memories, abstract things. Even if it's not intentional, I think that there's some pieces of ourselves that show up in our artwork. So weavings are especially symbolic because you can think of our days woven together, our years woven together. You can think of each strip of the weaving as a don't know, a year, a decade, a place that you lived, a person you encountered, some kind of significant milestone or event in your life, something meaningful. Even if you don't know what they are, you can still get a feeling for them representing portions of yourself, weaving time, places, characters of your life, joys and challenges, all the different parts of you that might seem random at the time as you're living them together into the beautiful tapestry of you and your life and your being. So however you want to process that and think about it, that is the gist of where I'm going in this project. So here we are almost at the halfway point. And it gives you an idea of, let me zoom out here. It gives you an idea of if you only would have cut the bottom part of the paper and kept this part uncut, what it could look like as a half woven paper. What I'm trying to decide right now is if I want to collage any tiny strips of paper on top of these skinny strips. I'm pretty sure I do, but I don't want to center it right in the middle. So I'm going to continue weaving one or two more to put it a little bit off center. Yes, I am going to get a piece of scrapbooking paper and put a skinny strip of it across this before weaving it in. That would even look interesting if you had a word that you wanted to highlight, to just glue this on top of the weaving and then write a word across this and continue weaving after that. So this one would stand out above the rest of the weaving. Choices, choices. Okay, getting some scrapbook paper. I have a stash of scrapbooking paper, painted papers, cardstock. This color might look interesting on it. I'm just gonna grab a couple of things out of here that might coordinate well. Okay, so I'm looking through the papers that I pulled out from my box. This is the first one that grabbed my attention. So I am going to cut a skinny strip from this. Yes, and glue it on top of that. I'm not a big fan of glue sticks because I can never get them to work very well for me, even if they're supposed to. And I am kind of a finger gluer, finger painter, finger gluer. Yep. I'm still toying with the idea of putting that on top and not weaving it in. I don't know why. I think I might just set it there for a minute. So I have been weaving along, and for some reason a couple random pieces are saying that they might not want to be part of the weaving, that they might want to be collaged on top of the whole thing. I'm not going to make a decision for sure on those until I select my photographs. So the next step is to select 2 photographs. One will be a current one of who I am today, what I look like today, and another one will be a childhood photo. I have printed out a couple different versions of my photos. I was thinking of using this one but wasn't sure if it was too large, so I printed some smaller ones and a couple other versions as long as I had space. It really is two completely different looks. I could, or you could, go with smaller photos, more of the weaving showing, or space to do some writing or collage extra photos, or a larger photo. I am kind of leaning towards the bigger one. Maybe that means I take these away. Let's see that. Now's the time to play with layout and design. I'm liking this frame with the strips of paper, so I'm going to come up with some of these as a frame. Let's see which ones. I considered using one of the last two papers that I had, cutting it and doing a little title of sorts. I don't think I'm going to do that. I'm thinking that this is done. So I'll trim off this edge. I'm liking a little bit of this popping up, so I'm not gluing down these edges. Right now I'm not cutting off the other edges either. So if you choose to put this into a book, let's talk about tipping it into a book. I don't have a full art journal that I'm doing here. I've got pages that are going to be bound into a journal. This page actually, I think, kind of influenced or inspired me to do this page. So if you're looking for a lesson where you're just painting the weaving, I've got a background lesson of this one that I'll put the link in the description of this one if you want to check that one out too. So anyway, these are going to be bound into a book. Right now they're just a loose pamphlet. I am going to make a little folded paper that can adhere our new page into a book that's already made, or a book that's already partially made, like mine. So I have the same type of paper as the pages. I've got, I don't know, maybe 1.5 inches, 2 inches. It doesn't even have to be this big. The idea is to glue it behind and then glue this onto it, so this becomes part of the rest of the book. So let's get it the same size here. And if you already had your book stitched together, you wouldn't be able to put this behind there. You could just glue it on top like this also. I probably should have mentioned somewhere along the way that I am not the neatest gluer, and when you do the finger painting glue like I do with photographs, we really have to be careful on the front of the photographs on your pages, because it can ruin them. There's those nice sticky dots that you can use sticker adhesive to glue your photographs onto your artwork, and that is a much neater process, and you don't have to worry about your fingerprints. So here's my tab that is going to make this part of the art journal. And you can always press that under a book to get it to really stick well also. As far as the back of this, for whatever artwork you wanted to do on this side, that's an interesting texture. You could paint right over it. That would be really fascinating. Or you could cover it up. For now, I am liking the look of these little tabs, little fringes sticking off the edges, but just depending on what the entire book looks like later and how big the cover is, it's possible to trim those. But I think this is done. I hope you have had fun thinking about the tapestry, the weaving of your life, and creating this project along with me.